Is anybody familiar with this feast day calendar? I seen it circulating online. I wanted to know for sure. This is a good calendar to start off with. But eventually, when you read enough scripture, these feast days on this calendar will start to fade away. Let me show you what I'm talking about. He made the moon for appointed feasts. The sun knows his going down. He made the moon for appointed feasts. So the moon must be important of when these feasts actually are and supposed to be observed. Blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon on our solemn feast day. He made the moon also to serve in her season, for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. From the moon is the sign of feasts, a light that decreases in her perfection. What is her perfected state? A full moon. So these 3 or 4 verses validate that the moon is important when ordering your feast days on your calendar. Let's go back to Sirach 43:6. He made the moon also to serve in her season for a declaration of times and a sign of the world. Jubilees 6:36, for there will be those who will surely make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. This is a declaration of time being sped up, as is mentioned in numerous scriptures throughout the Old, New, and the Apocrypha, that time will be sped up. Now, if you are not in a lunar calendar, how do you know that time is being sped up? How do you know the declaration of times? From the moon is the sign of feast, a light that decreases in her perfection. Based on that calendar, Pesach, Shabbat, and Sukkot, the moon, how is this a declaration or a sign of appointed feast if the moon phases are so different? And I guarantee you next year, on the same date, the moons will be all over the place again. How is this a sign of appointed feasts? The moon needs to be full. If Pesach, Shabbat, and Sukkot are in the middle of the month, the moon in its moon phase from the 14th to 15th day is a full moon, which validates the scriptures I just shown you. This is a prophecy of what we will fall into trying to order or reorder the calendar. They will go wrong as to the new moons and seasons and Shabbats and feasts. When it says and seasons, that makes me think that being in the northern hemisphere and doing these feast days wouldn't be correct. So let's go back to the calendar. Let's take Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. In scripture, it's supposed to be the 7th month. If you look at the moon phase of September 9th, it is not a new moon, where a light is first received upon the moon, which was told to us as a definition of the new moon in Enoch 78:14. Go 2 months after that, it would land you in Hanukkah, which is in the 9th month. Now, September, October, November, we know that the feast of Hanukkah that Yahushua observed was at winter time. November in the northern hemisphere is not winter. It's still, fall or autumn. So this eventually won't be correct. So if your new moons and your moon phases are wrong, that means the seasons most likely are going to be wrong, and your Shabbats and your feast days are most likely going to be wrong. This is why I promote the southern hemisphere of my calendar, even though I'm in the northern hemisphere. These are the feasts of Yahuwah, even set apart convocations, which you shall proclaim in their appointed seasons. A sister asked me, hi, observing feast days based on the southern hemisphere, when all throughout Leviticus 23, it says wherever you live. Curious to what scripture gives you another conclusion. And she obviously gave examples of saying wherever you live, and that the Strong's Concordance Moshab means dwelling place. When they had to bring their sacrifice to the altar, they wouldn't spread out all over the place. Even when they were in captivity. If you take the book of Ezra, when they were in captivity to the Assyrians, the Most High softened the king of Ashur's heart so that some of the priests and Levites could go back to Yerushalayim and observe the Feast of Pesach. If you remember Acts 20, Paul, he could have stayed in Ephesus and did the Feast of Shavuot, but he made it the point to cut off what he was doing and go back to Yerushalayim to observe the Feast of Shavuot. If you look at the book of Daniel, when Daniel prayed out the window, he could have prayed toward Egypt, he could have prayed towards Asia, he could have prayed towards Europe, but he chose to pray facing towards Yerushalayim. So the land is important. Even in Chronicles, when Solomon prayed to the Most High Yahuwah, he said, if your people, when they are in captivity, turn and pray towards your land, you will hear them. The land is important enough for us to observe, even the seasons. And if there was a curse saying that we would go out of season by doing these feast days, it has to be based on the biblical lands. If we're going to go back in our second Exodus to Jerusalem, which is in the southern hemisphere, we're going to be doing these feast days in that region at the appointed seasons anyway. And like I said, I'm not knocking this calendar. I'm just saying eventually when you read and learn enough scripture about the Most High's calendars mentioned in Enoch and the new moon festivals and feast days that's mentioned so closely to the Shabbats, you eventually will lose the understanding of this calendar.